Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Gabby and welcome. If you've never been here before, have no idea what I do here on my channel, I cover true crime cases, and all the cases that I cover are a little bit older. They're all basically 20 years or older, so if that's something that you might be interested in, maybe go down below, click that subscribe button, and also make sure to turn on the post notifications to be notified every time that I upload. So we have entered a new year. This is my first video of 2022, and I have a little bit of hope for this year because 22 is my favorite number. I don't know, I'm just fingers crossed. That is besides the point though. But anyways, here on my channel, some months out of the year, I will have themes, especially during the end of the year. But we're starting off the new year, we are in January, and I was thinking, you know, I want a theme for this month. So what better theme to do for the first month of the new year than to cover cases that were solved just last year. So for January of 2022, I'm going to be covering just cases that were solved during the year of 2021. With the case that we are discussing today, there are tons of articles about this case, especially since it was solved just last year. And as I was researching into the case, each article had unique information from one another. Say one article was done based on talking to the victim's sister, one was done based on talking to the victim's best friend, and some were just covering the main information surrounding the case. So I basically decided to compile all the information from all those articles and tell the story as complete as I can. With that being said, this is the case of Heather Porter. Heather Ann Porter was born in the year 1968 to parents George and Barbara Porter, and she had two siblings, Mary and Anthony. She was a sweet girl, a talented girl who was an avid artist. She loved to draw. She also loved music, and her favorite singer was Paul McCartney. She adored the Beatles, but Paul was definitely her favorite from the band. She just loved Paul McCartney so much, and she and her best friend would literally bake a cake every year on his birthday. Her best friend also jokingly described Heather as a self-proclaimed troublemaker. This case starts off in Maryland in the year 1981. It was Halethorpe, Maryland, to be exact. Halethorpe is a unincorporated community in Baltimore County. Based on my bit of research about the area, it isn't a place overrun by crime, but when you compare Halethorpe to other communities of similar size and with a similar population, its crime rate is higher than normal. Compared to the average US city, its crime rate is above average. Either way though, it was not really a place experiencing gruesome murders on the regular, that's for sure. One of the people who really pushed for Heather's case to eventually be solved was her best friend back in 1981, the person that she used to bake the cakes with for Paul McCartney's birthday. This woman's name is Sue Utsi. This was the person who was actually with Heather the night that she went missing. Sue at the time was 14 years old, a year older than Heather, and they were just the absolute best of friends though. On September 22nd of 1981, it was later in the day, and according to Sue, Heather had gotten into a very heated argument with her parents that night, and she just left the home at around 10:30 p.m. That's when her mother saw her last. Sue at the time was also punished by her parents. Sue left her home, basically sneaking out, and the two best friends met up to hang out for a little bit that night. That night, Heather was wearing olive-colored pants and a light blue striped pullover. She also had on a necklace, a silver necklace with a little marijuana leaf pendant on it. After they were done hanging out, they decided to start walking home. They didn't live too far away from each other. They had been walking down Hammond's Ferry Road in Lansdowne, heading towards their Halethorpe neighborhood, and when they got not far from where their homes were located, a few blocks away, they decided to go their separate ways. Sue heading to her house and Heather heading to hers. That, though, would be the last time, as they were parting ways, that Sue would ever see her best friend alive. The next morning, just a little before 7 a.m., a man was out walking his dog near Ridgewood Road and Goucher Boulevard in Towson, a community about 20 miles north of Halethorpe. He was walking next to a wooded area when he came across the lifeless body of the teenager. Authorities were called to the scene, and the investigation began immediately. Based on the surrounding area where her body was found, it was obvious that the poor girl had been dragged into the woods. She had been raped and her overall cause of death based on her autopsy was strangulation. The day they found the body, Heather had no identification on her, so she was originally a Jane Doe when they aired the case on the local news. It was actually Heather's friend that called authorities after seeing the program to tell them that the victim may be her friend. It was Heather's father who would ultimately go down to identify his daughter's remains. Sue told lawandcrime.com, as a 14-year-old waking up the next day to find out my best friend was murdered, I couldn't function for years. I'm the kind of friend you have for a lifetime, and Heather was the same kind of person. At the beginning of this case, authorities did think that possibly the teen did not want to go immediately back home after she hung out with Sue, that possibly she desired to hitchhike somewhere else that night, and she got into the wrong car. Police spokesman E.J. Miller said at the time, if she hitchhiked and the driver was her assailant, we've got a real problem. It could have been anybody that time of night, which he was right, because if she had hitchhiked, it could have been anyone coming through that area. And after doing what they did, they could have immediately left the area, never to be seen again. That's how it goes a lot of the time. But see, the thing is that Sue knew Heather better than anyone else. And Sue said that Heather would have never ever gotten into a car with anyone she did not know. Either she had been forced into a vehicle or it had to have been someone she knew. So Sue would have not believed the hitchhiking theory at all. Authorities didn't rule out the person being responsible, possibly being someone Heather knew, someone she may have even trusted. Could someone she knew have driven by not long after she separated from Sue and offered to drive her the rest of the way home and then took her life? That was a theory that was definitely considered at the time. 1981 though, that was before DNA testing, but of course they kept everything surrounding the case on file and were open to any theories that came in. And of course there were many theories. Through the years, Heather's family and close friend Sue did everything they could to make sure that Heather was not forgotten and that her case would eventually be solved. Unfortunately, though, it would take many years before it was. Sue told CBS Baltimore, I can't imagine her fear, what was going on in her mind. I can't imagine any of that. I had survivor's guilt. I carried that for many years, leaving her and not walking her home to her door. In any article where they talked to Sue, it's obvious that this ate her up. Her best friend's murder ate her up for the entire 40 years before it was solved. Like she said, she had survivor's guilt. She just thought, you know, if I had only just walked with her to her house, nothing would have happened. But of course, there was no way for her to know that something was going to happen. And that's just the reality of the situation. They were teenagers. They went on walks all the time. Sue had no idea that anything was going to happen. But of course, as a human, when something like that happens, you can't help but look at what you could have done differently. But like I said before, Sue had no idea that anything was going to happen. Sue was the kind of friend that you would want in life. Sue would phone the Baltimore police on the regular for about 4 decades, making sure they kept up with Heather's case and to see if there were ever any new updates, but there rarely ever were. This case was really at a standstill for nearly 40 years, which is just insane and so heartbreaking to think about. It's even crazier to think about because they had so much evidence when it came to this case. Heather's sister, Mary Porter, told CBS Baltimore back in 2017, before she passed away herself, she had 2 thumbprints on her neck. She had a handprint on her arm or bruises. She had skin underneath her fingernails. Her fingernails were broke from the struggle, so she fought to the death. They had fingerprints and they had this man's DNA because Heather had been raped. They had his semen on file. They had his skin particles, they had hair, even a piece of a shirt that he was wearing. Heather's sister back in 2017 just really couldn't understand how, with that much that was taken from the crime scene, how it hadn't been solved yet. Pretty much all of Heather's loved ones thought the same thing. How can there be so much on file, so much DNA obtained of the killer, and they still couldn't track him down. Now I'm going to get into one crazy little twisty factor of this case that I just have to include, and that is that in 2017, they started looking at Heather's case to see if there was a possible connection to a controversial priest. This priest's name was Father Joseph Maskell. If you watched the Netflix documentary, The Keepers, you know who I'm talking about. The documentary, The Keepers, goes into the alleged abuse done by this priest to girls at a Catholic high school and whether he was connected to a murder of a nun named Kathy Sesnick, who was a teacher at this all-girls Catholic high school in Baltimore, Maryland during the 60s. She was murdered in 1969. It is believed by many, and the documentary goes into the theory, that she was murdered by Father Maskell after finding out what he was doing to the girls at the school. That is a separate case, an entirely separate case of its own. It's a crazy rabbit hole. Definitely recommend the documentary. But Father Maskell did have a connection to the life of Heather Porter. Sue Yutzi would be quoted saying in 2017, including myself, "We were all connected to Father Maskell. He has hands in every one of these people's lives. I want answers to those questions." Based on my research, because I had to look into what Heather's connection was to the Catholic Church, Heather had been a daytime student at the Good Shepherd Center, which was operated by the Catholic Sisters of the Good Shepherd, and it was for teenage girls with behavioral issues. In the year 2017, they were considering that Heather's case may be connected to another murder that took place a few years earlier around the same area. On March 24th of 1975, 14-year-old Danny Crocetti vanished around the 4300 block of Allen Drive in Baltimore, Maryland. His body was found on the 28th. He had been found lying in a stream behind a Catholic school. He had been stabbed in the throat. Danny's case is unfortunately still unsolved to this day, and so is Kathy Sesnick's. Back in 2017, they did think that possibly all three murders, Danny's, Kathy's, and Heather's, were connected, and that maybe the killer was someone higher up in the Catholic Church around that area, like Father Maskell. This theory was dove into at the time, and Heather's loved ones were eager to see what the outcome was regarding that. But in the end, Heather's killer would not be greatly connected to the Catholic Church. Now let's get back to Heather's case in particular. Heather's sister, Mary, was asked, what if they found out who killed Heather and he's already dead? Because of course, it's been so many years. And she said, at least they're dead. At least they can't do it to anyone else. They can't do it to another living soul. They can't break another family. They can't hurt another innocent child. Well, the question asked back then was the reality of the situation. Investigators for years claimed that technology was just not advanced enough yet to solve the case. Well, in the year 2020, Baltimore County detectives with the BCOPD Homicide Cold Case Squad started reviewing Heather's case. They did the right thing, and they suggested that the killer's DNA be submitted for genetic genealogy, which, as we know, has been solving so many cold cases in the past few years. Bode Technology, which works to do just that, analyzed the DNA sent over. Within a short amount of time, they got a hit and sent over their results to the FBI to further look into. In February of 2021, just last year, they had a possible suspect in Heather's case. There was a match to the DNA. Sue at the time told The Sun that her stomach was in knots over the huge update in the case. The results identified a man named John Anthony Petreka Jr. as their suspect, but they needed to test the killer's DNA against this suspect to finalize everything. This man, though, had died many years back, being buried in the year 2000. Detectives, though, received permission from the Baltimore County State's Attorney's Office to dig up the man's body for further testing, and that's what they did on March 11th of last year. They exhumed John Anthony Petreka Jr.'s body to test the killer's DNA against his. They sent the DNA to Bode Technology to compare it, and the results came back in November of last year, only a few months ago, and it was a match. After 4 decades, they finally found Heather's killer. As they dove more into his past, everything started lining up even more. They discovered that John Anthony Petrarca Jr. had actually lived in Halethorpe and resided right in the 100 block of Ridge Avenue, right near where Heather was last seen the night she disappeared. They of course looked at his record to see if he had a criminal past, and he did. In the late 60s and early 70s, there were arrests for rape. After the identification of Heather's killer, Sue went on to tell CBS Baltimore, "Everyone's thanking me for Heather's case being solved. I did not solve the case. The police did. I love her. She was my best friend, and that's what you do." Sue stated that she can live with the fact that the killer is deceased, but it's still painful, even after 40 years. Since Heather's case has been solved and John Anthony Petrarca Jr. has been named the killer, they are looking at other murders around that time, around that area in Maryland, to see if he is possibly connected to any of those. But as of right now, as of me making this video, he has not been connected to any other murders, or at least it has not been made known to the public. Sue is of course so relieved that her best friend's murder has finally been solved, but she still, at the end of the day, she just wants to know why. Why did he choose Heather? Why did he do what he did? Why was he so filled with anger? And I think that's what so many other people in her similar situation think. They just wonder why. And I don't think any answer is a good enough answer to that question, because nothing will ever justify what they did. And I think some people are truly just evil or have some sort of evil inside of them. But all in all, that is the case of Heather Ann Porter. And unfortunately, her case is like so many other cases when it comes to most of her loved ones having since passed before her case was solved. Her parents had passed away, her sister had passed away. They weren't around to see Heather's case have a full conclusion to it. They never were able to find out who did this to her. I know that Heather's case is not a super in detailed long case. I know it's not going to be a long video, but it's one that I just really wanted to share on my channel for this month, because as I was looking into cases from 2021, it's one that I just kept going back to and I kept wanting to read more about, and it just kind of touched my heart a little because Sue and Heather's sister just did not give up, and Sue did so much for this case. That's the type of best friend that anyone would want, and she did not let Heather down in the slightest. But thank you all for taking a little bit of time out of your day to learn about Heather's case. And if there are any cases that you want me to cover during this month that are cold cases that were solved last year in 2021, you can put those recommendations down below in the comments. You can also email me at gabulosiscaserequests@gmail.com. And with all of that being said, I will see you all in the next one.